Hello and welcome to Uzreport World News. My name is Barnona Zarzoda. Uzbek President Shavkat Mirziyoyev on Tuesday ordered to liquidate the state-owned Uzagro-Himoya enterprise, which initially was created to carry out plant protection activity. At his regular meeting, Mirziyoyev confirmed the agenda of effective deployment on agrochemical services in the plant protection system.
The fight against the unpaired silkworm would be entrusted to the Association Uzbek-Ipak Sanoat, its constituent clusters, as well as district administrations. The supply of mineral fertilizers and chemicals would be entirely transferred to the private sector. The president stressed the need to create biolabs and plant clinics, involve qualified agronomists and entomologists, as well as create a wide network of agrochemical services available to each farmer. Agrobank was instructed to render the sphere financial support. At the first stage, the bank is to open a credit line for over $14 million for the organization of modern laboratories, the purchase of equipment, as well as the provision of working capital to service enterprises. The interest on loans for laboratory and other equipment purchased by entrepreneurs in the part that exceeds the base rate would be compensated from the budget. The Business Support Fund would provide a guarantee for the loan in the amount of up to 50%. Entrepreneurs would also receive a 30% compensation for cost of services provided to farmers for laboratory analysis. The current tax rates for entrepreneurs providing biological and chemical services would be reduced by 50%.
Uzbekistan has entered the list of developing countries that the Russian car-sharing service Anytime seeks to expand into, according to information published on vc.ru. The service already operates in Czech Republic, Kazakhstan and Belarus.
According to the requirement, the population of the city for the franchise must be more than 700,000 people. The lump sum fee would be over 40,000 euros. There would be no royalties for the first 6 months. The payback rate is said to be up to 50%. Car-sharing companies in Uzbekistan can freely rent their cars to individuals and companies for up to 30 days without any registration. A new bill that is set to be drawn up within the next 2 months will provide for mechanisms for protecting the rights of car-sharing services in case of traffic violations by customers, as well as conditions for the storage and parking of car-sharing cars.
Uzbekistan's Central Election Commission has launched preparations for presidential elections. Another event in Tashkent's National Library named Alisher Navoiy discussed the measures to ensure the voting rights for the citizens, including persons with disabilities, rules based on universally recognized standards.
The library held a signing ceremony of the Memorandum of Understanding between the Central Election Committee and the corresponding organizations aimed at supporting people with disabilities in Uzbekistan. Active efforts are currently underway to equip polling stations with signposts in visible places. Besides, on election day, the commission building would be stuffed by qualified medical personnel. In addition, people with disabilities would be included in the electoral commissions. I believe that the upcoming presidential election will take place at a high level. Some 800,000 persons with disabilities living in Uzbekistan will be able to give their votes. I want to express my gratitude both personally and on behalf of persons with disabilities for this concern.
To expand Uzbek-American interparliamentary cooperation and strengthen interaction with the U.S. Congress, Javlon Vahabov, ambassador of Uzbekistan in the U.S., has held several negotiations with representatives of the legislative body. Watch the details in our next story.
During the online meeting, U.S. Senator for Illinois Tammy Duckworth highlighted the Republic's efforts to promote peace and stability in Afghanistan and said that she would appear to partake in organizing U.S. legislators' visit to Uzbekistan as part of their regional tour to neighboring Afghanistan and Pakistan. Congresswoman Sarah Jacobs highlighted the vigorous reforms the Uzbek government has been implementing in recent years. The Uzbek ambassador Javlon Vahabov suggested the legislator considers the possibility of joining a parliamentary delegation chaired by Tran Kelly, who plans to organize a visit of the House of Representatives members to Uzbekistan in October. In her return, the legislator agreed to visit the Republic as a member of the U.S. delegation and demonstrated an interest in joining the Caucus on Uzbekistan. The member of Caucus on Uzbekistan, Congressman Michael Guest, serving as a representative for Mississippi's 3rd Congressional District in the U.S. House of Representatives, thanked the Uzbek military for participation in the best foray competition held in Camp Shelby training site last month. According to Michael Guest, Uzbek surgeons for the 2nd year in a row demonstrate high physical endurance. Michael Guest assured the readiness of the U.S. to support bilateral cooperation in the security field, trade, economic, cultural, and educational spheres.
European Council chairperson Charles Michel has praised the reform process in Uzbekistan and said that this institution was ready to continue partnership in period by 2028. In a letter addressed to President Shavkat Mirziyoyev, Charles Michel stressed the EU strongly welcomes Uzbekistan's efforts to promote cooperation, security and stability throughout Central Asia and including Afghanistan.
I'm pleased to note, despite the challenges posed by the COVID-19 crisis and its aftermath, the reform process in Uzbekistan continues to create opportunities for the further development of our ties based on shared values. We welcome your focus on strengthening the rule of law, respect for human rights and fundamental freedoms as key elements of sustainability and prosperity. Let me reaffirm that the EU is firmly committed to continuing its close dialogue with Uzbekistan. We're interested in completing the negotiation processes on a new agreement on expanded partnership and cooperation, which will provide a solid foundation for the development of our relations, said the head of the EU.
Vaccine makers are racing to get approval for their COVID-19 shots in younger and younger people. And on Tuesday, Moderna announced it would be the second firm to seek clearance to use their vaccine in school-aged children in the U.S. A clinical trial showed Moderna's shot was effective in adolescents aged 12 to 17, with no new or major safety problems. The Moderna vaccine, already authorized for adults aged 18 and up, will now go to the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, which could grant emergency use authorization as soon as July. It took U.S. regulators about a month to review and approve the Pfizer-BioNTech shot for ages 12 to 15. Moderna's trial studied 3,732 adolescents aged 12 to 17. 2/3 got the vaccine, and 1/3 got a placebo. 2 weeks after the second dose, researchers found no cases of COVID-19 in the vaccine group and 4 cases in the placebo group. Children rarely develop COVID-19 symptoms, but they remain at risk of falling seriously ill and can still transmit the virus. Widely vaccinating kids aged 12 and up could allow U.S. schools and summer camps to relax masking and social distancing measures suggested by the CDC. Moderna is currently testing its vaccine in children as young as 6 months of age.
In the global fight against the coronavirus, a new threat is emerging in India: black fungus. The rare fungal disease is spreading among COVID-19 patients across the country. Black fungus's official name is mucormyosis. It can cause blurred or double vision, chest pain, coughing blood, discoloration over the nose, and breathing difficulties. Data from the US Centers for Disease Control and Prevention shows it has a mortality rate of 54%. To put that in perspective, COVID-19 has a mortality rate of between 2 to 3%. Black fungus is not contagious, so it can't spread from contact between humans or animals. Experts say that factors behind the spike include unsanitary conditions and an overuse of certain drugs amid the pandemic, which suppress the immune system. The disease also has a close link to diabetes. Dr. Ranjit Gularia is the director of the All India Institute of Medical Sciences in Delhi and explained why COVID-19 is becoming a common precursor in the country.
And this causes a decrease in their immunity, which predisposes them to fungal infections like mucormycosis. Also, diabetes is a risk factor. And we know that India is the diabetic capital of the world. We have a large number of people who have diabetes. Many of them have diabetes where the control is very poor. So uncontrolled diabetes with COVID-19 can also predispose to development of mucormycosis.
Local media reported at least 7,250 cases have been identified across India as of May 19th, mostly in people infected with or recovering from COVID-19. India's health ministry said it was looking to rope in more companies to produce the antifungal drug used to treat it. But health systems are already overwhelmed, as India struggles with the second highest tally of COVID cases in the world.
Because we don't know 100% what the origin is, it's imperative that we look and we do an investigation.
Top U.S. infectious disease expert Dr. Anthony Fauci called for further investigation into the origins of the coronavirus on Tuesday, after a recent Wall Street Journal report about illnesses at a Chinese virology lab raised new questions about where COVID-19 may have come from, but said he and other experts felt it was more likely naturally occurring.
Many of us feel that it is more likely that this is a natural occurrence, as has happened with SARS-CoV-1, where it goes from an animal reservoir to a human. But we don't know 100% the answer to that. And since this is a question that keeps being asked, we feel strongly, all of us, that we should continue with the investigation and go to the next phase of the investigation that the WHO has done.
At the same White House COVID-19 briefing, senior advisor Andy Slavitt said finding the origin of the virus that has killed a reported 3.5 million people worldwide was a, quote, critical priority.
We need to get to the bottom of this, and we need a completely transparent process from China. We need the WHO to assist in that matter. We don't feel like we have that now. We need to get to the bottom of this, whatever the answer may be.
U.S. Health Secretary Javier Becerra called for international experts to be allowed to further evaluate the source of COVID-19 in a second phase investigation during a video address to the World Health Organization, but did not mention China directly.
Phase 2 of the COVID origin study must be launched with terms of reference that are transparent, science-based, and give international experts the independence to fully assess the source of the virus and the early days of the outbreak.
Government sources have told Reuters that U.S. intelligence agencies are examining reports that 3 researchers at China's Wuhan Institute of Virology were seriously ill a month before the first cases of COVID-19 were reported. On Monday, China's foreign ministry said it was, quote, completely untrue that 3 staff members at the Wuhan lab had fallen ill. Meanwhile, 2 congressional officials have told Reuters that the Senate and House of Representatives intelligence committees are conducting their own investigations into the origins of COVID-19 and how the Trump administration responded to the crisis. Last week, the House committee's Republican minority issued a report focusing particularly on the Wuhan Institute of Virology, asserting that there was, quote, significant circumstantial evidence that the COVID-19 outbreak may have been the result of a leak from the lab.
I informed President Abbas and earlier Prime Minister Netanyahu that the United States will notify Congress of our intention to provide $75 million in additional development and economic assistance for the Palestinians in 2021.
Speaking alongside Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas in the West Bank city of Ramallah on Tuesday, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken pledged that Washington would provide new aid to help rebuild Gaza as part of efforts to bolster a ceasefire between Hamas and Israel.
I say this as a father. No child, whether Israeli, Palestinian, or American, is a statistic. We know the human consequences when violence takes the upper hand, and we are determined that not be the case.
Blinken reiterated that Washington intended to ensure that Hamas, which it regards as a terrorist organization, did not benefit from the humanitarian aid, a potentially difficult task. Blinken began his visit to the region in Jerusalem, where he held talks with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who warned Hamas against any resumption of hostilities.
If Hamas breaks the calm and attacks Israel, our response will be very powerful. And we have discussed ways of how to work together to prevent Hamas rearmament with the weapons and means of aggression.
Hoping to reverse a move taken by former President Donald Trump that angered Palestinians, Blinken said the United States would advance the process of reopening its Jerusalem consulate that had served as its diplomatic channel to the Palestinians. Blinken's visit to the region comes after a Cairo-brokered ceasefire between Israel and Hamas last Friday after days of deadly violence that recalled their last major conflict in 2014. Hundreds of Israeli airstrikes killed at least 254 people in Gaza and injured over 1,900, Palestinian medics said. The Israeli military put Israel's death toll at 13. During his tour, Blinken will next head to Cairo and Jordan.
Joe Biden, for the first time in his presidency, will meet face-to-face with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Geneva next month. The Kremlin and the White House on Tuesday both confirmed the summit's date, June 16th, and the sit-down comes amid sharp disputes over election interference, cyber attacks, human rights, and Ukraine. White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki.
This is how diplomacy works. We don't meet with people only when we agree. It's actually important to meet with leaders when we have a range of disagreements, as we do with Russian leaders.
The icy relations between the two leaders were on full display in March when Biden told ABC News he thought Putin was, quote, a killer.
Does President Biden regret calling Vladimir Putin a killer?
No, the president gave a direct answer to a direct question.
The Russian had a ready retort.
And you know, I remember in my childhood, when we argued in the courtyard, we used to say, it takes one to know one.
Diplomats have since sought ways for the two rivals to work together. Last week, Secretary of State Antony Blinken met Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov in Iceland.
It's our view that if the leaders of Russia and the United States can work together cooperatively, our people, the world, can be a safer and more secure place, and that's what we seek. But Sergei, welcome. It's good to see you.
It won't be Biden's first handshake with Putin. The two met in 2011 when Biden was vice president and Putin then prime minister. And looking back at the last decade, the sentiment hasn't much changed.
It's in our self-interest, and I hope in the self-interest of Russia, to have our relationships closer.
The Kremlin said in a statement that the two leaders would discuss bilateral ties, problems related to strategic nuclear stability, and cooperation in the fight against COVID-19.
Home prices just keep rising across the U.S. The S&P Case-Shiller Index of Home Prices in 20 metropolitan areas released Tuesday rose more than 13% on a yearly basis in March. That's the biggest annual price increase in more than 7 years, and it was higher than economists had expected. And it's an acceleration from the 12% recorded in February. Price increases were steepest in Phoenix, Arizona, up 20% over last year. San Diego, California, and Seattle, Washington followed closely behind. An acute shortage of homes for sale, coupled with strong demand for bigger accommodations as people work and study from home, have driven prices to a record high. But that tight supply is threatening to slow the housing momentum. On Tuesday, the Commerce Department reported that new home sales dropped 5.9% last month. Economists do not believe another housing bubble is developing. They note that a mismatch between supply and demand is behind the surge, not poor lending practices that triggered the financial crisis in 2008.
Say it now, baby.
Say his name loud. Say his name.
George Floyd.
The U.S. on Tuesday marked 1 year since the murder of George Floyd at the hands of police, with mostly peaceful gatherings, and with Floyd's family visiting the White House on the day that President Joe Biden had set as a deadline for passage of a police reform bill in Floyd's name, but that is still stalled in Congress. Floyd family attorney Ben Crump.
The president and the vice president met with the family for over an hour, and he wanted to check on them on today of all days to see how they were doing, to reiterate that they are still doing everything to make sure that his legacy is respected, and that involves us going to meet with senators in just a few moments to continue to press forward for the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act that he says he is ready to sign any day.
Floyd's brother Philanese had another way of putting it by saying that if the country can pass federal laws to protect bald eagles, it can pass a law to protect people of color. Biden later said he was hopeful a bill would be on his desk after Memorial Day. In New York City, Mayor Bill de Blasio and civil rights activist Reverend Al Sharpton kneeled for 9 minutes and 29 seconds, the amount of time that convicted Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin kept his knee on Floyd's neck.
As we took that knee, imagine how long that was on a human being's neck. It's time we correct policing in this country.
Around the country, protests and marches were smaller than in the immediate aftermath of Floyd's death, but the passion from those attending was still strong.
You cannot save George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and not stand with the families.
At a gathering at the Minneapolis intersection where Floyd was killed, now called George Floyd Square, a scare occurred when multiple gunshots were heard, with one person suffering a non-life-threatening injury, according to media reports. A candlelight vigil at the stretch of road where Chauvin knelt on Floyd's neck was planned for Tuesday evening.
An earthquake of 5.3 magnitude rocked the borderlands between Rwanda and Democratic Republic of Congo on Tuesday morning, the Rwanda Seismic Monitor has said. And that's raised fears of a fresh eruption, following one at the weekend that killed at least 32 people. On Saturday, Congo's Mount Nyiragongo, one of the world's most active and dangerous volcanoes, erupted. It sent a river of lava downhill towards Goma, a city of some 2 million people. The molten rock stopped a few hundred meters short of the city limits, but wrecked 17 villages on the way. Around 1,000 homes were destroyed and more than 5,000 people displaced, according to the United Nations. One survivor is Nzanzu Mahiwa Zawadi. He fled with his family as lava approached their home. His children have been asking when they can go back.
It hurts to be human. It's hard when you've lost. And the kids? We try to show them that it's over. But it's hard. As an adult, it hurts me. Because it's a blow. A really big blow.
Tuesday's quake struck in the Rugerero sector in western Rwanda, according to the Rwanda Seismic Monitor. The earthquake appears to have collapsed several buildings in Goma, a Reuters reporter said, though it was not clear if there were any casualties. Multiple cracks in the earth have emerged in Goma, and the area has been experiencing tremors since Nyiragongo's eruption. The lava lake in the volcano's crater appears to have refilled. That, according to the UN's refugee agency, has raised fears of new fissures in the volcano. Or another eruption.
Airlines in Europe face a race to adapt their flight plans. That after a Ryanair jet was forced to land in Belarus, sparking outrage in countries around the world. A dissident Belarusian journalist travelling on the plane was seized by local authorities. For the main airline of Belarus, the consequences are simple enough. Belavia has cancelled all flights to London and Paris after air permits were suspended by the UK and France. The EU will also shut out the Belarusian carrier, with leaders calling for planes from the country to be banned from the bloc's airspace. Other airlines operating in the region face more complicated decisions. Lufthansa, Air France, KLM and SAS are among those to say they will avoid Belarus airspace. But that is no easy task, as the country lies along a major air corridor connecting Europe and Asia. European Air Traffic Agency Eurocontrol says around 100 flights by EU and UK carriers normally fly over Belarus each day. It's now advising airlines to route planes over the Baltic instead. Ukraine will also ban flights to and from Belarus. For air passengers, the various route changes may mean journeys take longer. For Belarus, the consequences could be worse. It could soon be reachable by air only over its border with close ally Russia, and it stands to lose millions of dollars in fees paid by airlines to allow overflights.
Stocks on Wall Street fell slightly after straddling the break-even line in a choppy session Tuesday. Investors continued to try to assess the path of inflation after Fed officials downplayed pressure on rising prices. The Dow and S&P 500 shed more than 0.5%, while the Nasdaq finished flat. Systematic Ventures CEO Max Wolf thinks stocks may have topped out for now.
So I think today, but a little bit more the last 2 weeks, we've been seeing a lack of upside catalyst. There's not really anything for the market to kind of coalesce around.
Energy was the weakest sector, with ExxonMobil down 2%. The oil giant was the biggest drag on the S&P. Sources said Exxon's second-largest shareholder, BlackRock, is backing several dissidents to shake up its board. Lordstown Motors shares dropped 7%. The electric vehicle startup cut its production forecast for the endurance truck in half. It also said it needs more capital to carry out its plans. But airline stocks ascended. United Airlines and Hawaiian Holdings issued upbeat outlooks for air traffic and ticket sales.
And this was our last report. Thank you for watching and goodbye.